All right, welcome everybody to the USDA panel here. I actually attended this panel in its form last year's summit, and it was a great discussion. It covered a lot of different topics, including we had questions about USDA policies, we had questions about internal policies, kind of personnel policies and so forth, and a lot of curiosity about the agencies themselves and so forth. So we do have quite a number of experts up here who can give you a lot of different perspectives. We have representatives here from offices in DC, as well as Nevada, California, and Oregon. And I will introduce our moderator for today, who is Megan Walter. Megan is with an engineer with the NRCS at the state office in Oregon. And I'll turn it over to you, Megan.
Well, thank you very much, Rob, and thanks to everybody for joining us today. On the stage here with me, I have 4 close friends and colleagues. They're not just people I work with. I now count these individuals as close friends of mine. So I'm happy that you can join us today for a conversation about what it's like to work for USDA, how we create welcoming and inclusive workplace policies, and to get to know us. As Gabby said in her soil health workshop this afternoon, USDA is the people's department. We are by and for the people. So we're here to serve you, our customers, as well as our employees. For those of you who don't know, USDA is in every county across the nation. We literally have an office in every county. Not only are we everywhere in the United States, we're also across the world with some of our international agencies as well. And we know at USDA that LGBT individuals live in every county across the nation as well. So for us at USDA, this is really just about good customer service, reaching out to the people who live and work in the communities that we serve. So that is sort of the space that we're coming from. At USDA, we like to think that we are on the forefront of developing inclusive policies. Just to give you one example, in 1993, USDA added sexual orientation to its non-discrimination policy, meaning that we were one of the first federal agencies to protect our LGB employees back in 1993. This was 2 years before the federal government as a whole did that. So USDA has always been at the forefront of creating a welcoming workplace. We really mean it when we say we support our LGBT communities and our employees. So some of the ways that we do that are through our LGBT Special Emphasis Program, which you'll hear about today. My friends here are Special Emphasis Program Managers. We also have an employee resource group, as well as holding rural summits across the nation. So before I give you a little bit more information on that, let me introduce you to my friends. I have Heather Emmons here, who's a Public Affairs Specialist for the Natural Resources Conservation Service in Nevada. Justin Gonzalez is the Program Management Branch Chief for the Natural Resources Conservation Service in Washington, D.C. Kimberly Monsay is a Training Specialist with the Food Safety Inspection Service, so we got our meat inspectors in the house as well. And a dear friend of mine, Elise Miller, who is also an engineer, and she works for NRCS here in California. So you may have a couple of engineers today, but we're not going to death by PowerPoint you today. We want you to get to know us, who we are. We are the real people that bring these farm services to you, and there's a few of you that we want to come work for us. So I'll get the questions going, and you're welcome to raise a hand and ask more questions of us. But let me tell you about our Special Emphasis Program. This was created in 2009 by former Secretary of Agriculture Tom Vilsack. So through our LGBT Special Emphasis Program, we focus on the recruitment, retention, and engagement of our LGBT employees and applicants. So here today we are here on official time. We have a booth here. You can come visit and learn about working for us. And we're here to recruit you and tell you all about the great things that USDA has to offer. So that's a management-driven group. So we're really serious. It's written into our policies about making sure that all individuals, all the people, all of the citizens of the United States have access to the services that USDA has to offer. So, as I said, I want you to get to know us, to get to know USDA. We're not just a bureaucracy. We are real people with real stories. If you joined the Soil Health Workshop, you heard an amazing story from Gabby Coughlin, our Special Emphasis Program Manager in Oregon. Sometimes our lives are messy. But we still come to work every day, and we choose to provide a service to you, our citizens. So I want to start with Kimberly. I don't think you have to turn on the microphone. It should be ready to go. And Kimberly, can you tell me what's your personal story? What is it? Why do you work for USDA? Why are you a special emphasis program manager?
Sure. So again, my name is Kimberly Monse. I work for the Food Safety and Inspection Service. We regulate all beef, poultry, egg, and now catfish. I started my career in 2005 as a student intern. I completed enough hours and requirements that I non-competitively got a position in DC. So fortunately, I got to advance very quickly in my career as a senior training specialist. And so when I try and tell my personal story, when I was 14 years old in high school, my sister outed me. She had heard rumors on the soccer team from other people that her little sister liked a girl on the soccer team. And she told my mom. And so that was something very difficult for my family. I'm from San Antonio, Texas. And so San Antonio is a little more progressive, but that was back in the early 2000s. So for me, I grew up with a hearing impaired brother. And so advocacy was something it was ingrained in my brain as a young child. And so when I became a full-time employee at Food Safety, I noticed that we had something called an Equal Employment Opportunity Advisory Committee. So we call those EEOACs. And I got a part of it. I wanted to be a part of advocacy, especially from the LGBT front, but I wasn't out at work yet. And so taking it to the agency level, like Megan said, with the special emphasis program, I applied to be the LGBT SEPM because for me that was kind of my way of now taking control of me coming out because I didn't have that opportunity as a young child at 14 years old. So that's kind of where my passion comes from. And on the workplace coming out, on top of that, I have quite a traumatic story. I went to lunch with a group of about 5 or 6 people every single day. I spent time with their families. We talked politics, we talked sports. We really became a family. And one day, LGBT rights came up. I was not out yet. And it started to get pretty heated. There was very religious people in the room, and I started advocating for my people. And one person specifically turned and looked at me and said, "Why do you care about this so much? Are you gay or something?" And it gives me goosebumps every time I tell the story because it was like, wow, the hatred is still there. But I took the opportunity to say yes. I had a partner. I was in a lesbian relationship at the time. And I took the opportunity to recognize that good people do bad things sometimes. And so it was my opportunity to advocate and to educate. And fortunately enough, I had 2 of those individuals personally call me the next day to tell me how inspired they were by my story and how much I changed their perception of what it means to be LGBT, especially in the workplace. So that's kind of the personal sense of what I do and why I'm so passionate to be in this advocacy role representing my agency within USDA. So
Thank you, Kim.
yeah, sure.
So just a recap of a couple of things. You might hear us use acronyms. We love our acronyms at USDA. So you might hear us use the term SEPM or SEPM. Again, that stands for Special Emphasis Program Manager, which we all are. And as SEPMs, Special Emphasis Program Managers, we do that as a collateral duty. So when we were introduced, we all have titles: engineers, training specialists, branch chief, public affairs specialists. Those are our day jobs. We also have gay jobs, or as I like to think of them, queer jobs, because we're really inclusive. So we do those as collateral duty, 20% of our time. That's something extra that we choose to do in addition to all the other bureaucracy that we deal with, because we know that this is important. It's important to our families, it's important to us, and it's important to our customers as well. So we choose to take on these extra duties. And as Kimberly points out, it's not always easy. Sometimes we expose ourselves to negative comments, or oftentimes good people say bad things. And so while USDA is a great place to work, it's not always rainbows, sunshines, and kittens. But we have friends here and support networks to help each other. And that's what's important. That's what we want to tell you about today. So thank you for sharing your story, Kimberly. And I want to hear from Heather. You have an interesting perspective. What brings you to this program?
Sure. So my name is Heather Emmons, and as Megan said, I'm the Public Affairs Officer in NRCS for the state of Nevada. And I'm an ally. My story is a little different. So I grew up in a very conservative Christian household. My mom worked in a Methodist church in Vegas, of all things. I know it's a little weird, and so of course my brother and sister and I were all kind of raised as preacher's kids almost, you know, and so I went away to college and came home on spring break. Yeah, spring break, and my parents were like, "Your brother's gay," and just it all came out, and I was like, and everybody's crying, and everything, you know, and I'm going, this isn't supposed to be my spring break. But you know, I found myself, even though my brother and I fought as cats and dogs when we were growing up, I became fiercely defensive of him because I just saw everything just change in the blink of an eye with my family. And so that's been, you know, now 20-year journey of, you know, watching my parents try to deal with it and me trying to, you know, navigate that and mediate that because I had gay friends that didn't bother me, you know, and being defensive of him. And that brought us very, very close. But scroll forward, I came over to NRCS about 4 years ago, and I started helping the person that was my predecessor in the LGBT SEPM role. And he was putting on some events, and Megan was involved in the 3-state event we did and things like that. And so I just started helping him with things and getting to know what this is. And then one thing Megan didn't mention is these are terms. So it's a 3-year term. So when Bill was at the end of his term, you know, it came up for, does anybody want to jump in and fill in with this? And I said, well, I'm already helping you. I'm already doing it. I don't mind. I would like to do this. And I kind of felt personally called to do it because I thought, you know, not only do I have a lot to learn, but it's personal for me. And I've learned a lot from just the couple of years I've been doing this. I've learned a lot personally. I've learned a lot how, you know, my brother might be feeling about things that I didn't even think about. And it's helped me in the workplace. Now I'm to the point where, you know, if my employees come into me and rattle off something to me or bring something to my attention or say something, I know enough to help them now understand, well, wait a minute, you need to think about this, or let me help you, give you this perspective that as a straight person maybe you haven't thought about. So now I feel great being in this position and you know, coming along in the journey. So
And being a part of this team.
Yeah, being a part of this cool team.
And so Heather's story is a great illustration that we welcome all in our LGBT special emphasis program, as well as our, our employee resource group. We have Equality USDA is our employee resource group, and so that works on more of a personal level, supporting employees and their family members, working on career development and mentorship. So we have a management-driven program, that's the LGBT Special Emphasis Program, and we have an employee-driven program, which is our employee resource group. So we're super active, and we are active because of people like us sitting on the stage, not only writing these policies, but coming out and working with you in your fields, helping you understand soil health, mapping your soils, training your meat inspectors. Heather has been posting on Facebook and tweeting today on behalf of NRCS. And so other agencies in USDA, Oregon NRCS is now retweeting that we are here and a part of this. So it's people like us who go to work every day and choose to provide a service, right? Service is at the heart of good government. What service are you providing today? And in the special emphasis program and as members of the employee resource group, we ask ourselves that every day. How do we serve our LGBT employees? How do we serve our LGBT customers, our minority customers and employees as well? So we really have two arms of the same body with our special emphasis program and our employee resource group. And it takes everyone. It takes a team to make this work. From the public affairs and the field work and the meat inspection. I just keep coming back to that. I love me some steak, so. So I want to hear, Justin, you work in Washington, D.C. Justin is a branch chief for the Natural Resources Conservation Service. We're going to brag on him a little bit. So what is your story? How do you come to NRCS?
So I'm from Kentucky originally, but I grew up in Auburn, Alabama. I never actually fit in. My brother was always into sports, every sport you could imagine. My sister was a cheerleader, and me, not into any of that. I actually was picked on in high school. I think that I can be kind of obvious, I think. And so I got picked on in high school, and then I was getting closer to be 18 years old, and my stepfather threatened to out me to my mom. Me and my mom have always been really close. And I beat him to the punch. I walked right beside him, went outside, and said, "Hey, Mom, I'm gay. Sorry." And you know, I think her words were, "If that's all that I have to worry about, we're okay." I wish it was really that easy. It didn't get easier for a while. I moved out of the house and went looking for a career, and the first job that I got hired for was a airplane maintenance company in South Alabama, and I was the one and only gay person, LGBT, anything there. I used to get harassed walking from the car to the office. I had to go through the hangar, and I actually got fired 2 weeks later after getting the job for no reason, but we chalk it up to being gay. And it was because of that you know, I started to seek out employment that had protections. It became apparent to me Alabama has, at that time, and I think still to this day, no protections for LGBT as far as employment, much anything else either. And I stumbled across NRCS, and that's what was really important to me. I come from farmers. It's not really my personal forte. I'm an accountant. But it was really important to me to be a part of something that they cared about their employees regardless. And actually so much so that I started writing policy for NRCS. And one of the policies, the very first policy I think I wrote was the federal travel regulations for LGBT. And actually Megan helped me a little bit with that. So I've been at NRCS for 6 years, and I'm incredibly loyal to the agency because of the protections that they offer. I'm happy to say I'm happily married now to a guy from El Salvador. So we are a binational couple and have its own challenges. So I guess I picked difficult roads, but they're enjoyable. So.
Thank you, Justin. Again, Justin's story speaks to the diversity that we represent at USDA. We come from farm backgrounds. We want to move up within USDA. We seek opportunities either to move out of our home state or to just explore other areas of the country. And through USDA, that is possible. And one of the reasons it is possible is because of the policies that we have that Justin alluded to. That protection for sexual orientation and now gender identity and expression within our non-discrimination protections, that's what enables us to come to work at USDA. You can get married on Friday, and Monday you can come to work and put your spouse's picture on your desk, and you can't be fired. Doesn't mean that negative comments don't happen, but again, we have a support system in place to help employees navigate that. So thank you for sharing that, Justin. And that brings me to Elise, our local girl here from California. Elise works in Southern California. So tell us a little bit about your story.
Thank you, Megan. Yes, hi everybody. My name's Elizabeth Miller. I go by Elise, so please call me Elise. And I am an area engineer. I work out of Southern California, out of Indio, so there is someplace hotter than where we are today. And so I'm happy to be here. And I've been working for the federal government for about 29 years. First for the Soil Conservation Service, and now for the Natural Resources Conservation Service, and all within California, and all for the same agency. So it's really great. tomorrow I'm going to share a lot of my earlier story with you in a power talk. But I will tell you that I was born and raised east of here, east of Sacramento, in the Sierra foothills, and just a very rural, beautiful area. And my dad worked for the USDA before me, so I became a second generation. He was an area engineer, and he worked until he passed. But a lot of what happened through my agency here in California is most of those 29 years I lived or was perceived as a heterosexual male. So in 2014, I transitioned from male to female, and with the support of my agency and the support of USDA, and went through that whole process. And it was quite an elaborate process, but I had such great backing from both management and from basically all of the staff within California Natural Resources Conservation Service. Just came to my aid and really helped me in seeing my real self and developing into who I am today. So that's sort of what happened in California, and during these last 5 years, I've also served, as Megan said, as a special emphasis program manager. And in getting that position, it is what allowed me to see a pathway to go about in transition. So it's been a great opportunity, and
Thank you, Elise. So now that you can hear a little bit about each one of us, and you can see the reality of sort of what it is to work for USDA, who we are, the types of people we are, I want you to know that at USDA, about 2.7% of our employees identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender. Now, about 11 to 13% of people prefer not to say. And sometimes they prefer not to say because they're uncomfortable with the question, they're not confident that it's going to be anonymous, they're not out, or they really disagree with the question. But what these numbers tell us, they come from the Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey, so it's a sampling of our employees. It's certainly not all of our employees. But what these numbers tell us is that the demographics within USDA are similar to what we see across the nation. So we really do reflect the diversity that is our nation, that makes up the American people. And what we've seen since we've started tracking those numbers about 5 or 6 years ago is a slight increase in the number of people who are comfortable identifying as LGBT. So that Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey is the only source of data that we have for employment demographics for LGBT. Other agencies, such as the Environmental Protection Agency, have started to pilot projects to collect that data, and that's something that we're looking into at USDA as well, so that we can really capture the numbers, the demographics of our people. That's one of the reasons we have a special emphasis program, is because we want our labor force at USDA to match the civilian labor force. And that's really important to us, to get those numbers and to capture those numbers. So again, we are the People's Department. We are by and for the people, and we want to reflect that. So I want to pick up on something that Elise mentioned and come back to you a little bit. You mentioned transitioning at work. So can you tell us a little bit about the resources that USDA and NRCS made available to support you in that process?
Yes. So when I first started to come out, it was rather scary. It wasn't obvious where these resources were. Certainly, our Office of Personnel Management had some information written up in regards to transitioning in the workforce. So I went to LGB employees that I knew were already out, and I asked them for their opinion, and there's always something great about going to the community that you're coming out to and you know, asking and learning from there what they've done and how they've experienced things. There's not a whole lot of people coming out as trans. You know, it's not as often. So we might have a couple more transgender people scattered around the country, but it's not necessarily known that they're trans. It's not advertised, and it's not advertised for the purposes of privacy. Those employees deserve privacy, and they don't necessarily need a bunch of employees writing them or asking them questions if they don't choose to do so. But we also have the special emphasis program that was also a vehicle that I could use. In California, at the time, we had two special emphasis program managers, which was unique to most states. California, I believe Florida had two SEPMs, and so that was also very helpful. But I found myself in asking my friend who happened to be gay, worked out up in the Central Valley, on where he would go. He certainly worked with or was involved early on in the developments of policy within USDA, so he certainly knew a lot more people than I did. And I was introduced to a trainer out of our National Civil Rights Division. And that gentleman just retired, but he had helped other transgender people transition in the workplace. I believe he said I was number 7. So I knew I was coming with someone with experience who could help me go through that process. Now I'm also an engineer, and so everything is rather structured for me. So I did a lot of research, and I planned out a lot of things. But at some point, I needed to. My own personal transition was started without the knowledge of the federal government, and I reached that point where really there were enough changes happening that I needed to come out to management. So I needed to, they were probably scratching their heads, what's going on with them? You know, that's probably what was going on in their heads. You know, the hair is getting longer, there seems to be a little bit of makeup going on there, and you know, so, you know, the chest is changing a little bit. So you know people in management are going to start noticing those things. And so at some point I wrote up a document asking management to do certain things for me and to help me through my transition. And part of that was developing a transition plan, a transition team to develop that plan, and certain things, a timeline on what I needed to do, when I needed to do that. And I went straight to the top. I didn't go to my supervisor, my immediate supervisor. I went to the head of the state for NRCS. And I walked in there with information in hand because I knew I would probably need to educate. Every place I go, I need to educate usually on transgender issues if I need to talk to someone about it. And I came with a book on transitioning in the workplace that I bought online. I mean, I came with everything. And I
So you were providing the resources too.
Yes. So I didn't want to leave anything to chance when I came to management. And it was from there that a transition plan was created and executed. So when I came out in 2014, November 20th, there was already training throughout the state on LGBT issues to all NRCS employees. And then then everybody was notified at the same time. So it was a rather coordinated effort that there was a lot of secrecy to, only a few people knew about, and before that switch changed from Robert Joseph male to Elizabeth Catherine female.
Thank you, Elise. And that's an interesting point you bring up, that yes, there are many things that management does to support us, policies that USDA and other agencies develop, but it's also incumbent upon us as well to find that education, bring it to people that we know to be safe people, and share that as well. So sometimes we end up educating our managers and supervisors about what we need. As I always say, you don't get what you don't ask for. And sometimes if you don't tell your managers and supervisors what it is that you need to be supported in place, they don't know any better. And until we tell them and give them that information, they don't get the opportunity to do better as well. So Elise is a perfect example of that give and take, asking, seeking support from management, but also being willing to come to the table, educating, and also getting our allies and accomplices involved in that educational process as well. So thank you, Elise. And again, Elise has a power talk tomorrow in which you'll get to hear a little bit more about her story. So we don't want to give it all away today. This is a teaser. But you know, that's a good example of what is a relatively difficult or personal experience and making it into something positive. And that was something that your coworkers and your managers helped you do. Justin, I think you have a similar story as well, in which you know, at times there has been somebody who has reached out and done something positive. Can you give us an example of that in your career?
Yeah, actually, when I first came on, it was in an internship program. And the internship program definitely had its challenges. It was,
and this is for you right there. This is a different internship program.
yeah,
It's
completely
not the
different
same
than
one,
what you.
Just
yeah.
so you know.
But I mean, it had its challenges. You know, coming on board, just being out and being myself. You know, I was still a little fearful of the whole being fired thing. Sometimes words can be just words, and so I was a little apprehensive. But the supervisor that I had at the time, she was amazing. She immediately took to me and almost mothered me in a way. She made sure that it was a full-time travel for about 1.5 years, the internship. She made sure that she sent me somewhere each and every time, that I would have a support group. There would be maybe a city that has a good reputation for having LGBT-friendly people there. So she looked out for me in that way, and I really appreciated that, because I didn't ask for it, and she wanted to make sure that I felt safe mentally and physically, and important like everybody else that was there. Yeah, I mean, she's great. I mean, she was invited to the wedding, so we're friends.
So that's an example of one small service that a supervisor chose to provide. She didn't have to.
Right. It's those small acts of kindness, decency, that you can do, that I can do every single day, that actually contribute. As I mentioned, I'm not a farmer or soil scientist or anything like that. I'm an accountant, and sometimes it's hard to drive those two together. But it is those small acts of kindness and decency that you can do to contribute to the cause. So.
And that's what we choose to do within the LGBT Special Emphasis Program, as well as through our employee resource group, Equality USDA. We choose to provide those services and those acts of kindness to each other every day, and to our potential applicants, our customers, and our employees. I will tell you, had I not come to the LGBT Special Emphasis Program and found this role, I may not be with USDA, because I personally couldn't quite find my niche within USDA and NRCS. So for me, this was an opportunity, a development initiative, and it was a way for me to connect with real people who are not just colleagues. I mean, we did a bang-up job on that booth in there, and Gabby's presentation was on point. But it's not just those professional things, it's It's the personal relationships that we cultivate. That's what we're pushing with our special emphasis program and our employee resource group, is to cultivate that change. And it's done on a person-to-person level. And sometimes when you think about a big government, something big like USDA, it's really hard to imagine where that service or that kindness or that authenticity is, where that opportunity is to cultivate change. But it's through us. It's through us every day and the service that we choose to provide as USDA employees. So thank you for sharing that, Justin. I appreciate that. And these are just the little sprinkles of kindness that we have every day at USDA. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about the outreach that we do and some of the initiatives. We've all had different initiatives, outreach and recruitment projects that we've been working on. So Heather, what have you been doing in Nevada?
Sure. So, like I said, I've been doing this special emphasis program manager position for 2 years. So every day is learning, and I'm learning from Megan and everybody else, and we share information, which is really helpful. So a few of the things I started doing right off the bat was having lunch and learns internally. So as a SEPM, your job is not only to do outreach externally to the public, but also internally, and bring some awareness to your employees and help them, because we're all customer service based. So I want to make sure my employees in Nevada understand the issues. They understand, if someone comes in the office and not be, biased or judgmental or any of that. We're supposed to provide good customer service. So the more I can help them be aware and be educated, the better we all are. So I started internally, and a few of the things I did is I reached out to the University of Nevada, Reno, and started making connections there, and connected with, actually, first I heard a podcast of a friend of mine who runs a Reno tabloid, and he had done a podcast with two guys that are married, but they are doing a project. This is kind of interesting. It's called the Nevada Lgbt Archives, and what it is, it's part of the Park Service, and it's a thematic study that the one gentleman was doing his dissertation and was able to finish his PhD doing this project for the Park Service, and it's a thematic study on it's called a Heritage Initiative theme study. And so he's trying to preserve the history of, of LGBT in Nevada, because we're not good at preserving our history, right? So he's kind of almost like a museum curator. And so I brought him and his husband in. They both run the Nevada LGBT Archives. It might be interesting for you guys to Google that. And brought in some artifacts that are part of that, and preserving that history, talking about the history of the Reno Rodeo and the gay aspect to that and everything. So, so I brought them in as speakers, and that was kind of unique. I try to make sure my employees get some different aspects from the community, some different information, get to meet different people. And then just this month, I brought in a gentleman that is a museum director at the university. But what I did as a SEPM is I noticed on the university's website, they had kind of done this transformation of their diversity center, and the new president, he's newer, created this LGBTQ task force, and this person was one of the museum directors, but he's put in charge of this task force. So I just reached out, hey, can I come over, meet you, have some coffee, this is what I'm about, this is what I'm doing, and got to know him. And what's interesting about him is his artwork that he does. Part of it is, the best way to describe it's kind of interesting. It's looking at hate crimes committed toward LGBT people. Think Matthew Shepard, that sort of thing. And so he actually goes to those sites and photographs those areas to preserve that memory and to preserve that act. And it's kind of odd, it's kind of different, but it's I never thought about that, because he said, it's different. murder's not just murder, or these acts of hate crimes, that's different. And we don't want to forget that. So I brought him in to speak to our folks at a Lunch and Learn as well. And so they got to not only find out about the new museum, that's the new museum gallery that's going to be opening soon, and get kind of the inside scoop on that, but got to see what his work is about, and then learn about the LGBTQ task force at UNR and why they're going down that road. And part of that is UNR president is he kind of created that committee to address the climate and take the temperature, making sure what they're doing at the university. So we got to learn about all of that. So I think that's kind of my role, is to reach out to folks like that, bring them inside, and then externally, I decided we got a Pride booth. So our Pride booth, our Pride festival up in Reno is next month. So I'm really excited about that. We haven't done a booth yet, so a lot of my colleagues here have done booths at different things. So that's pretty exciting. And there's just different things like that that I try to do. I also became aware of the Northern Nevada Diversity Summit they were having at the university as well. And they were having all these different speakers. And one of the things that there's different special emphasis program managers for underserved audiences. So we're the LGBT. There's one for blacks. There's one for vets. There's one for females, and all the different, So this diversity summit had speakers on all those different areas, and so I made sure my civil rights team was aware of this, and it was free, and we all went over there, and out of that you connect with your community, and out of that I walked away with connections to an organization called NALA, Northern Nevada LGBTQ Leadership Alliance, where this gentleman has brought together all the LGBT organizations in one spot on a Facebook page together. They meet once in a while so that so they're not stepping on each other's toes when we have events or whatnot, right? So what does that help me with? Well, part of my job, as Megan said, is to make sure people are aware when we have job openings, right? So now, because I've made that connection, I sent job announcements for some of our pathways internships to this person, and he just dispersed it to all these organizations in one shot. So now it's that networking, right? So that's that networking and getting to know folks. So I'm doing my job is getting our career opportunities out there, and then I'm also doing my job internally with internal in-office, lunch and learn opportunities.
That's great. That's great examples of what we do in the special emphasis program, work on internal employee education to remove those barriers to having a welcoming, inclusive workplace, as well as getting out into the community and letting people know about working with USDA. And one of the reasons that is important is because of historic discrimination. So raise your hand if you've heard of the Lavender Scare? Yes, the students have. So I see some folks who who haven't heard of that. So you might ask, why does USDA have an LGBT special emphasis program? It's to address historic discrimination that was perpetuated through the Lavender Scare. So back in the 50s, there was an executive order written by President Eisenhower and enforced by the FBI and the Office of Personnel Management that allowed federal employees to be dismissed from federal service because of their perceived or actual sexual orientation. And at the time, gender identity wasn't anywhere on anyone's radar. And so that stayed on the books for decades, which means if you were gay, bisexual, lesbian, you could be fired from federal service because the idea was that you had something to hide. You had something shameful. It was a secret. And you could be blackmailed to reveal national security secrets. And so this prevented LGBT individuals from getting security clearances, from having those protections in federal employment into the 90s. So when we talk about special emphasis programs, whether it's for women, Asian American, Native Americans, it's to address a need where there has been historic discrimination. That's why we exist as special emphasis program managers and have this LGBT program. And so it's important for us to get out into the community and to share this message of a welcoming workplace. So we heard a little bit, what Nevada did, what's happening out in the field. Kimberly, can you tell me, up in Washington, D.C., what does USDA do for outreach and recruitment retention events up at the national office?
So just as Heather was saying, luckily for the last, 2 years we've been at DC Pride. The last 2 years, we have had a booth at DC Pride, and it blows my mind because people come up all the time and say, oh, wow, the government's here? The USDA is here? And so we are making our presence known, and that's what I really like, to be there, talk about, on my day job, I'm a career development facilitator. I do employee development. I run a leadership development program. We have about 10,000 employees that I manage under our formal mentoring program. So development is very important. So letting those people know we're here to also develop you. That's the WIFM, right? So with these events, we can recruit. We can get people to recognize that USDA is a welcoming workplace, and there are career advancement opportunities. And like Megan was telling you, with the Federal Employment Viewpoint Survey, we're starting to be able to get that data specifically for USDA. And so what we have done as a group, and specifically what I do with my agency, is I've developed this constituent group, and now I can give out training opportunities, get those emails out, get that information, apply to my leadership program, apply to mentoring, because that's going to help you advance in your career. So I'm able to kind of do that outreach internally in my agency, and then we make sure to do that on the DC front. This year, although our president did not do a proclamation for LGBT Pride Month, USDA still moved forward until someone tells us no. We had a fantastic observance at headquarters 2 weeks ago. Then after the observance, we hosted the first LGBT Flash Mentoring event. So I got to work with my department, Connect, to help us encourage mentoring and slap LGBT in front of it, and we hosted it. We had an educational moment from Elise, and we had mentors across USDA agencies come and talk about why it's important, whether they were LGBT or not, to support it. So we're starting to do that, making sure that we're still visible, because we got to keep this train moving, and we'll ask for forgiveness later. So that's
you.
DC front.
So you can see, whether we're in Nevada, Oregon, Washington, D.C., or California, we're all about getting out and engaging with our communities, again, providing that service, as well as working with our employees on building their own knowledge base, education, to create welcoming and inclusive workplace policies. So we've done a lot of talking. I've done a lot of question asking. Let me open it up to you. Are there questions from the audience, things that we haven't touched on that you want to know more about? You have a captive audience. Yes, Coleman.
Not to make it political, but seeing as how some of our leaders don't necessarily have values, I know LGBT values and LGBT activism, how do you find that balance between social and political activism and your federal job? How do you deal in that environment?
That's an excellent question. So let me just paraphrase. Trying to find the balance between the professional advocacy and the social activism as a federal employee. So certainly I have some thoughts on that, but anybody else want to jump and tackle that?
Yeah, the great thing that we have is our executive orders and our policy that are at the department level. And so we have responsibilities at the department level in supporting our special emphasis program. And so that's our justification. And so, yes, we have to be very cautious. We've got to make sure that we have the support from the department. But just like the example I just gave for our observance, we still push forward with having an observance because we have that support in our directives and our policies supporting sexual orientation and gender identity. So it is a balancing act, but with passionate people like us and beautiful people like this, it's hard to tell us no.
That's a very good point. Thank you, Kimberly. And that's a good question, because I want to be clear. In federal employment, we're not here to lobby. We have very clear guidance. We've got the Hatch Act, so nobody's lobbying or campaigning. or soliciting funds. We leave that up to Cultivating Change to take care of that. I think Rob will hit us up in a little bit. We are very cognizant of that in the special emphasis program, and there's a fine line between activism and advocacy, but we're focused on recruitment, retention, and employee engagement. Anything along those lines, those are within the realms of the special emphasis program, and again, that's management driven. When we start to get into that advocacy area, or maybe even the activism area, in that gray area, then we start moving into the operation of our employee resource group. And that employee resource group has a lot more flexibility because it is not beholden to the department. So those are the ways that we navigate that space or that fine line, is using different arms of the same body to do so. And sometimes it just takes pushing the envelope, asking forgiveness instead of permission, and getting a hand slapped. And we all have our own experiences with that as well. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, and I would also say we kind of make it to, in recognizing the protected classes that we have under Title VII, and when we advocate for it, have the understanding we're not trying to change your beliefs, we're just trying to change your behaviors as a federal employee. This is what you should be doing. So having that conversation like that is just a little bit easier for people to kind of get on board with us. So.
And one way we did that at USDA, in 2016, USDA implemented a mandatory online training, LGBT non-discrimination training. So every USDA employee had to take that. Again, it was a virtual training, and now that's part of our new training policy. So when new employees come on, that's part of your training regime, is to understand that, because it's about the behavior in the workplace, not your beliefs. You are entitled to your beliefs, and again, it's the People's Department. It is our differences that make us USDA and able to serve our customers. So if we all thought the same, we wouldn't really be doing justice to our customers as well. So thank you for that question. I think we've got a few more minutes. Are there other questions out there? Yes, sir.
So I've been able to hear all the programs, policies, and everything that y'all have implemented and been a part of. I'm sorry, my name is Grant.
Oh, hello, Grant.
Hello.
I'm curious, in all of that, how often do y'all or anybody that you know still meet any type of adversity in the workplace?
Meet adversity?
Yeah.
Adversity,
Just relative to LGBT issues, even in policies.
to be honest, I think it's all too often. So,
Yeah, I was going to say something very recent. I have a lot of problems with terminology at work. Preference for me is to call my husband. I'll settle for partner if that's what you like. But I have a specific individual at work that calls him my special friend. It's incredibly offensive. It's just one of you're always going to have that. But the good thing is that at USDA, the LGBT SEPM group, this is like a little family. I can always call or text any of these people, and I always have a support group. You do have the policies that you can always fall back on, and in my experience, whenever you raise that you're having a problem, it's quick to be dealt with. I know for my employees, as soon as I became branch chief, the very first thing that we talked about in our staff meeting was EEO. It's on your individual development plan. You get rated every year, and while it's already a no-fly zone, I just made it very, very serious. It's a no-fly zone. So I think that everybody sort of shares that very strong belief that that's just not going to be tolerated. So.
Yeah. And so my agency is different than theirs in the fact that it's a regulatory agency. And so we have plants all over the nation. That's where they're inspecting the meat, the poultry, and the egg. And so since the government doesn't own the plants, so we have our own individual plant owners, since we are funding them and we're providing them inspectors, they have to follow our regulations. And so full disclosure, it was a couple years ago, we had a plant that someone that worked in the plant that was not a federal employee put a anti-marriage magazine on the table. And someone notified us in our civil rights division and let them know. And so we had to contact that plant and ask them to immediately remove it because it doesn't align with our policies. And, you know, it would get very extreme, but not that we would shut the plant down, but at the same time, that would have been a very intense conversation if they weren't going to follow that. So I find, you know, in my role, those are the situations that I'm being brought. Is, you know, I have these people in a plant that they're threatened by the plant owners because they're not federal employees, and so making it, you know, working with those plants and understanding what our policies are and what they need to do as plant owners to support our employees, it comes up. But that's where, you know, it makes me happy with the work that we do, that we can educate them on those things. So,
Yeah, and I do want to acknowledge that there's a fair amount of adversity in any workplace, specifically the federal government, specifically agriculture, and that exists. And certainly that is something I have experienced as a woman. I'm an engineer, and working in a predominantly male field, predominantly with older white men, is something that I have experienced too. So it's not necessarily unique to LGBT. We all face that adversity in the workplace. And so to those of you preparing for your careers, you know, I tell you that you should expect adversity, right? It doesn't matter where you work. It doesn't matter who you are bound to face adversity. Somebody who doesn't agree with who you are at work. But it's about the people you connect with at work. It's about the family that you build at work so that you have a support system to respond to that. And so maybe you don't respond to it. That's why we have allies and accomplices, right? Is when it's too intense for you to deal with, I tell you, I often get the weird random calls about this is what happened to me in the workplace, and I'm like, on it, all right, this is what we're gonna do. I got your anti-harassment policy, here's your civil rights policy statement, here's your rights as a federal employee. You need to start documenting it, send yourself emails. And so it's all about that. I don't want to say clap back because there's more thought to clapping back, but it is the structure that we have built to support each other, that you don't have to stand alone and face adversity by yourself. You have a team to come with you, and if you can't stand up, if you're not ready to do that yet, there are many of us here who will help you do that. And it's not just one agency. Now we have power in numbers, right? We have the power in numbers across the department, people like us who choose to come to work and provide this service every day. Does that answer your question, Grant? Thank you. Let's see how we're doing on time. I think we have one more question. Time for one more question if there's one out there. I mean, I think we're fearful every day, but that's under any administration. And to be honest, most of us are on the younger side, so there is a lot more uncertainty. But we have heard from previous generations who lived under different administrations, and they survived. We had, back in the 90s, we had the Gay Lesbian Employee Advisory Council that was the precursor to the Special Emphasis Program and the Employee Resource Group. So we have that written history. And we know that we can go back to that. If the swipe of a pen changes the departmental regulation that allows us to exist in the special emphasis program, that employee resource group, Equality USDA, is going to come out shooting rainbows. So we have contingency plans, and I don't want to give the impression that we are preparing for battle. We're not. We are pursuing business as usual. And again, it comes back to whether a program exists, whether there is a special emphasis, it doesn't matter at this point because we found each other. And you see just 5 of us on the stage. There's just a handful of us here today. But there are hundreds, if not thousands of us across USDA who have now connected with each other. So it's more than a policy, right? It's written into each of us. We have cultivated that change in who we are and the employees that we have become. I'm no longer a special emphasis program manager. I just loiter and lurk around the program. But I have told my boss, you can't put this monster back in the box. It cannot be undone. So whatever the policy is, we'll keep working on it and pushing it, but the monster is out of the box, and we're here to do the work.
Well, like we've mentioned, you know, we have an element to our performance plans that's EEO. I mean, we have to be, there's every employee, it doesn't mean just us that are SCPM, every employee, you know, at USDA, I mean, at least I know for NRCS, has an EEO element to our performance plans. So we all have a kind of a, you know.
We all have that impetus, and I want to be very clear. We are here on official time. We used official money to sponsor the event, to have that booth, to register. This is an official function of USDA. This is how we do business. Thank you very much for your time and attention.
Thank you so
today.
much.
Visit us in our booth and learn all about working for USDA. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Megan. Megan, Heather, Justin, Kimberly, and Elise, for your expertise and your experience, and whether we frame it as advocacy or simply outreach and a passion with these policies and so forth, we are all benefiting from them. And USDA obviously is an enormous agency with a footprint, as Megan said, in every county out there. So this has so much benefit throughout the entire system. So once again, thank you. We really appreciate the support of USDA and the message that you bring. Obviously, the foundation here at the summit has purposefully provided networking times throughout the day for you to ask those questions that you weren't quite brave enough to raise your hand and ask, or you think, well, maybe I'll just do this on the side. There are lots of opportunities. There is a booth over there. Grab them, talk to them, ask them any question that you have. So at this point, I would also point out, if you didn't attend a workshop last time, we do want your feedback on these workshops. This one was really valuable. And if you use the app, the Concise app, and go into the particular workshop, this one, the USDA panel, click on the chart which says poll. We'd really like to have some feedback on the panel and how we might improve it in the future. But once again, thanks everybody here.